sometimes you have to do things on the fly, and this is the beginning of the Sin Boldly radio program. Hang on one second. Is that you, Dr. Christian?
Oh, hi, this is Mark Christian.
Hey, Mark, how are you? Hang on one second, okay?
Sure.
All right. I want to thank my listeners for listening to the Sin Boldly radio program, and today we have a very special guest. Before we get to Dr. Christian, just want to, thank you for tuning into KPFT's HD3 channel here at kpft.org, or if you have one of those fancy new digital radios. I'm Evan McClanahan. I'm the pastor at First Evangelical Lutheran Church here in Houston. This is the Sin Boldly radio program. No, we do not encourage people to sin, much less sin boldly, but rather to live in this sinful world, and to do that as a Christian, well, sometimes you have to be very bold indeed. So today I have a very special guest, and he called right at 5 o'clock. So we're kind of doing some, not show prep, I wouldn't say, but just introductions here for the first time on the air. So, Dr. Christian, are you there?
I'm right here.
Okay.
Thank you much for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for being our guest. You can hear me okay?
I do.
Good deal, good deal. Well, I was just introducing the show a little bit to folks who listen. Folks, this is really, it's a topic we haven't done before on the show, and very special guest. Dr. Mark Christian is the founder and executive director of the Global Faith Institute. He is a convert from Islam to Christianity, and his great uncle was a co-founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, and his father and uncle both remain influential Brotherhood advisors. Dr. Christian has an intimate and unique understanding of the history and culture of the Middle East and the role of the Muslim Brotherhood in the terrorism we see today. And very complex topic, lots and lots of different areas in which to go. So it'll be an hour that's just jam-packed. And, well, Dr. Christian, I'm just so glad that through a mutual friend we were able to make a contact and you could come on. And what I really want to do is just have a show that's edifying for those out there that maybe don't know a lot about Islam and some of the current movements in Islam. And but first, let's hear your story. I didn't want to offer much of a biography because part of the show really today is your biography. So welcome to the program, and if you would just tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to be a Christian.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and I am so glad that you corrected the very first part of it, that I'm a convert from Islam to Christianity and not the opposite, and praise the Lord for that.
Indeed.
So I grew up in Cairo, Egypt, and I will just share with you my background, and you can ask me any questions, that comes to your mind to clarify to the listeners. So I grew up in Cairo, Egypt, and in a decent, good family. My dad is a physician, and my mom is a college graduate, and she worked a little bit as a teacher, but then she stay-at-home mom and so forth. And my life really started, and my faith journey really started by the age of 5. One of the most influential things that took place at that time is an incident that took place when I was 5 years old that introduced me to Allah, the God of Islam, the God that I believed, that the only God, at that time. And my upbringing from that point on has been influenced by my family, and especially my dad and who he is and so forth. And my dad actually is, self-made man. He's a physician, OBGYN by practice, and also he is an imam. Imam is like an equal to a pastor in Christianity, to make just a comparison. There is a huge big difference between Islam altogether and Christianity, but just to make people understand that Imam is a religious leader. And, he has a couple of mosques that he leads, and multiple teachings that takes place at home and other places. And he writes books about Islam. He has 19 books out already. And he's a religious leader, in the simplest forms. He is one of the top leaders of Islamic movement in Egypt. So I was influenced big time by that, and from the age of 5 all the way to the age of 23, I was following in the footsteps of my dad as the firstborn, doing the exact same things that was expected from me, and even a little bit more. And I start memorizing the Quran. The Quran is the scripture of Islam. I start memorizing it. It's one of the duties and the rituals for Muslims to do, to memorize the verses. It's not just something that they encourage to do in our faith as Christians, but it is an obligation. But, it's not an obligation to memorize everything, but I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I also was, by the age of 12, actually, to summarize my life, is I was so advanced in my Islamic studies and my, devoutness to Islam and the rituals of Islam, that I became accepted as a child imam who is substituting for his dad when he's not around. And sometimes I go in and I open the mosque and I call for the prayers and so forth by the age of 12. And my life continued that way for quite some time. During those early years of my life, I was deeply rooted into the Islamic studies, understanding the Islamic teaching, Sharia law, and everything about Islam in so deep kind of information and so forth and practice. And by the age of 23, this is my life will start changing big time. I start questioning Islam. And to be honest with you, I was not trying to question Islam because I want to separate ways with Islam. I wanted to be like a new generation that will answer questions, that will address the topics better than even my dad and others. I wanted to be a better religious leader than even anybody before me. The kind of energy that you have when you are kind of, in the early 20s and so forth, that was getting into me. And when I started digging into the teachings of Islam and so forth, instead of being more rooted into Islam, I became disillusioned and tried to leave Islam because I find lots of discrepancies and misunderstanding. To sum up my conclusion at that time, Islam is no religion at all. Allah is not the creator of heaven and earth. Muhammad was not a prophet in any way. Just Muhammad and the people around him were gathered together to build kind of a religious and a fascist and a theocratic political movement, and use the religion as a means to unite the movement and fuel the movement to succeed. And Islam is a collection of a little bit of Christianity, Judaism, paganism, cultural things, and so forth. And when I say all those statements, I'm not saying them lightly, and I know that it offends lots of people when I say that, but this is my conclusion, and I have big reasons to back up this conclusion that I was just mentioning.
Well,
Yep.
Go ahead.
And at this point in time in my life, I was facing lots of problems because of my, conclusions. And one of them is, all of a sudden, you have to understand that you cannot say, I don't believe in Islam anymore. You cannot say that in a Muslim country. You cannot say that to a Muslim family. You cannot say that to your parents, especially the kind of parents I have and the families I have. Why? Because Islam is very clear. Muhammad, the founder of Islam, said a very simple thing: whoever leaves Islam, kill him. And that is an order that every Muslim in every Muslim country has been taking it very serious for many, many years. Some people have been able to follow through, some others did it. But I had a choice. I said, I can actually live kind of my life without even facing the reality and not being upfront about my belief in Islam anymore. I can live this way. But I didn't. I actually came to my mentors, my family and stuff like that, telling them, I don't believe in Islam anymore. And I was not trying to be like confrontational. I was actually looking for help more than anything else, because you have no idea how it looks like when you live all your life believing in one thing, and all of a sudden the rug of truth is pulled underneath you, and everything becomes shaky and very, doubtful about anything in life. This is the kind of life I was living at that time. And to make very short, for the following years after that, I lived a life that is very, very challenging in multiple fronts, with relationship with family, privileges have been taken away, and spiritual life is next to none, zero. And I try to convince myself every day that God does not exist, that maybe, you can call it being an atheist or agnostic or whatever you want to call it, just a time when you live your life fulfilling all your needs and not caring about anything around you. And I can testify to the time that I lived without God, that is life not worth even living. Because here is how I kind of explain it. when you live without God and without any kind of a spiritual compass in your life, especially the right one, you become very self-indulged and very selfish in many ways. And all what you care about is kind of trying to please yourself as much as you can. And in the process, you hurt everybody around you, and you hurt the most important thing, you hurt yourself as well. Mm-hmm. And this is a kind of life when you are living, caring about one thing, it's amusing yourself to death and caring about nothing other than yourself, that you end up doing nothing to yourself or anybody around you. Yeah. And I lived this kind of life for a few years, and life started having, more problems than I can even imagine. From a earthly perspective, life was doing very well. I graduated medical school. I started working as a physician. I had a business on the side. Financially, I was doing great, partying like you can even imagine, and many other things. But deep inside, I was dead. And there is lots of problems and broken relationships as well, and not life that I cared for so much. So I started having some questions about my, very existence and why I live and why I'm here on this earth. And then I started looking for philosophy to help me out. I tried to look for people who made it before me, and they have some kind of a look into life better than I do. I don't want to look into religion whatsoever because I was angry at God. I don't believe that He existed at that time, but also I was angry at Him. It's just very weird, that you actually, when you say that I don't believe in God, so you ask yourself, so what is it that you don't believe in? And I lived this life kind of this way. So I started looking for philosophy and so forth. And one thing led to another, that I started getting introduced to Christianity and Christian literature, firstly without knowing that. And then later on, I started realizing that this is about Christianity, about Jesus and so forth. And that led me to another journey and a long run to get to know more about Jesus and so forth. I will stop for a second if you have any questions to me so I can continue.
Well, I think, that's a great start. I do want to get into some more specifics about some of the theological contradictions. I mean, I'm thinking of this show as, a lot of, let me take a step back. A lot of us in the West really don't know a lot about Islam, not theologically. Some of us who get into maybe theological studies or apologetics will learn enough about Islam to sort of know how to respond to it. But most folks don't know a lot about Islamic theology. So I do want to get to that. I want to take a little bit of a step back. And I don't know if you remember the order of what happened, but when you began to doubt, when you were maybe 23 or maybe a little bit before that, when you began to doubt the truthfulness of Islam, do you remember if you doubted Muhammad first or Allah first, or does it matter?
Oh, it does matter. When I was digging into history and to theology to get some kind of the arguments that never been answered, that I thought I would answer them. And Muhammad and the God of Islam, or Allah, goes hand in hand because he talks about God and he says that His name or His highest name is unknown, but he says that Allah is the name that we have to call Him, and this is the name that has been revealed to Him. But Allah has multiple names, 99 of them, and the hidden name is nobody knows about. And to find out if what He says is legitimate or not, it was very crucial. So when I started doubting the story of Muhammad, and to be honest with you, I started actually feeling sorry for Muhammad at some point in time because I studied the man in depth that more than you can even imagine. The way I actually check things all the time is by asking questions and try to put myself in the shoes of that person at that time and see how he thinks and so forth, and to try to dig for facts to find out more about it. And I doubted Muhammad had his own life journey, and making things up for lying or whatever for different. I can share you one thing. Okay, Muhammad actually started Islam by claiming, and many people think that he went to the cave and so forth, but the reality is Islam really started by an incident where he said that overnight he has been visited by a unicorn with a horse with big wings. He jumped on it and went all the way to Jerusalem, and over there he met Jesus, Moses, and Abraham, and everything else, and everybody else. And then he started climbing up to heaven to meet God face to face. and this is when the real message of Islam started. Well, I believed that all the time as a kid. But then when you start digging into a little bit of, is this incident really kind of believable? And, if he really a man that can commit this kind of miracles, and is he really connected to a supernatural creator of heaven and earth that can do that stuff to him or not? This is a good question that needs to be answered. Mm-hmm. And I found that none of that is true.
Okay, now you said unicorn, right?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I heard that right. And it's funny. I heard someone talking about Noah's Ark today, and the unicorn being a one-horned, not a horse that can fly, but in the Bible, a unicorn is like a hippopotamus or a rhinoceros or something with one horn. But that aside, so for you began to doubt the integrity or the authority of Muhammad's story, and you began to think, well, maybe this person really isn't hearing from God. Is that kind of how it began?
It began to understand what is the real intention and what is the main goal, and you can see it, all the time, that it is not saving humanity. It is not anything other establishing a state or building a political system that is going to be ever expanding until it will be a great, huge, big kind of, an empire.
Yeah.
So when you see his actions, is he coming for the good of humanity, or is he coming for a good for something else? And that's what the question. I love your question because it's really, I've never been asked the question. I try to find out the real intention of Muhammad's message and what he was trying to accomplish, really. When you see how Jesus walked, to John the Baptist, and then after that, on his walk, he's in a constant mission to save people, to heal people, to reach out to them, to tell them about repentance and following the right thing, and look for their own good and so forth. And you see other prophets as well throughout the Bible. Now, when you look at them and how Islam twisted many of those messages to fit in the narrative of Islam, yet it is kind of grasping the essence of it. And you see what the message of Muhammad and what was his message altogether. Number one, Muhammad's message is started by this. Christianity got it all wrong, and Jews has so many rules that it's ridiculous. I am the only person that knows more about Judaism and Christianity more than anybody else. So he came in with a narrative to destroy Christianity and Judaism in its current form, and it is in its form at that time. And why he was doing this? Because he says, you have to come and submit to me so I can expand and enlarge my state. So how is that even a mission that is saving people? The intention or the reason for Muhammad's mission by itself tells a lot about what Islam is all about.
Yeah. Certainly in Jesus Christ, I find an amazingly compelling and merciful character through whose sacrifice I find myself, willing to follow. Can I interrupt
you for a second?
Yeah.
The message of Jesus is a fulfillment of the scripture altogether, and for many, many reasons. Okay, and you will find that proved, throughout the Bible. And one of the most important things when we ask ourselves, and I asked myself that question as well when I was walking into following Jesus and to submit my life to him. Well, is Jesus really is who he is claiming he is, or are we just making this up? And why Jesus? The very important question is anybody dying on the cross can die for my own sin, or it is only Jesus? So it has to be the uniqueness of Jesus himself. And then we have to believe in really what Jesus' message throughout his life on earth and then on the cross and the resurrection, and how our sin is hanging on the cross, and how can this is really be true for us and not just something that we are hoping it is.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, when you leave, say, Islam, because you begin to question the authority and the truthfulness, perhaps, and whether or not it's of God, the message of Muhammad, and you go to Christianity, surely you're going to take that same skepticism at that point to Christianity, right? And you're going to say, well, is Jesus someone who is as trustworthy as Christians believe he is, because there are miracles associated with Jesus too, right? I mean, raising Lazarus from the dead and his own resurrection from the dead. And, so did you bring that same kind of skepticism into Christianity?
Absolutely. I'm into that. And here is the thing that I mentioned about Muhammad. See, if Muhammad really has the power and has that relationship with the creator of heaven and earth, so then I'm not going to doubt if he ride a unicorn or ride an elephant to Jerusalem.
Right.
But if he is not who he's claiming to be, and there is nothing to back up his claims in his future life or in afterlife of his claims, then I would doubt the incident itself.
Right.
It is not about Jesus, doing, believable kind of miracles or not. It is about who Jesus is. If I realize that Jesus is from God and he is God, then all the miracles that he did and all the miracles that he's doing in everybody's life till today can be believable. And yes, I brought my skepticism to the whole Bible and to understand the message of Jesus and to understand how he's fulfilled the scripture and how can I accept him as my Lord and Savior and to be hanging my life on the cross with him and believing that he's the only one to lead me to heaven.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't help but, and this might cause a lot of offense, but I can't help but make a comparison to Joseph Smith of Mormonism as well. I mean, they're
absolutely,
they're just, the parallels are kind of jumping off the page. But one is, and I've spoken with Mormon missionaries, and one of the questions I asked is, I said, do you realize how much your faith in the God or the gods, as it were, of the Book of Mormon and the other writings are dependent on the reliability of Joseph Smith? I mean, it really hinges on him as being a true prophet. And, when you study the life of Joseph Smith and what his goals seem to be, they're not exactly my ideal of high virtue, and I certainly don't think God's ideal of high virtue. It's not that Joseph Smith couldn't, if he were a true prophet of God, seen things through stones and gotten gold tablets and all, although I think all of that is a lie. But it's not that couldn't have taken place per se. It's that there's no good reason to believe it did, because I can't trust the person telling the story. And I would think that with Muhammad, that's the same thing that you ran across as well. We can't trust the person telling the story because the goals seem so out of line with what God would want for his creation.
Intentions and goals and actions really says a lot about what you are trying to do and accomplish in life. And, I cannot help it but bring the example of George Washington, for example. Sometimes I'm really, in a little bit into politics and so forth. And when you see that George Washington, when they came to him after the war and everything has been successful and so forth, and says, you're going to be our new king. And he said, we did not fight this war to replace George the fourth or the fifth with George the first. Mm-hmm. And that tells you a lot about his real intention was the good and the freedom of American people and the people around him. So you can tell a lot about why somebody is doing what he's doing, and this is why when you see the humility of Jesus Christ, the statements that he says one time after another, how he makes himself available to the poor, to the sick, to the needy, to the woman at the well, you can see that his intentions is nothing for anything other for saving the people and to glorify the Father, as he all continues saying. Yeah. Intentions means a lot, and when somebody acts in a way that seems very selfish, then you have doubts about his actions altogether.
Right. Well, I wanted to make that distinction because a lot of liberal Christians, really are very happy to equate the God that Muhammad proclaims and the God that the Scriptures reveal. And that always just boggles my mind that liberal Christians will give up their own God so quickly, because you can't have it both ways. Either the God either Allah is the one true God, or Yahweh or Father, Son, Holy Spirit, as revealed in the Scriptures, is the one true God. But you can't have your proverbial cake and eat it too. So
this is a very good point. If you don't mind, can I elaborate on that in a couple of points?
Sure.
Number one is, some Christians and some people in the West kind of believed in the lie that says that Allah means the God, and this means that the God, so he is the same God because we all worship the same God. Christians worshiping him different from Muslims, stuff like that. And to answer that point, and there is another point I want to highlight as well, but just to answer that point, if it is a translation of the God or not, the name of God has been God has settled this argument altogether when Moses was talking to God and asking him, when I go to my people, who should I tell them who you are so they can believe me? And he said, I am who I am. God is not known by his name. What he told Moses at that time, that when you go to to my people and tell him exactly what I told you, they will know who I am immediately. Mm-hmm. And this is what we're talking about. So when we kind of introduce to God and his nature, and we see the God of Islam and his nature, and then we can recognize the God of the Bible is completely different in his nature and his mission and his hope for humanity is different from God of Islam. God of Islam is, to sum up the God of Islam altogether, in a very simple thing. God of Islam is asking the people who believes in him to fight the people who doesn't believe in him and to fight each other until the death of both. The ultimate sacrifice is for the person who believes in Allah to die in the battle as a martyr and to kill everybody else who doesn't believe. So Allah's kingdom is established on earth. When you see the end result of this is what? Allah is glorified as establishing a kingdom on earth, and both those who believes in him dying and those who doesn't believe in him dying. Is that in any similarity to the God of Islam, to God of the Bible?
No, Jesus plainly said, "My kingdom is not of this world." But let me push back a little, because if a Muslim were sitting, say, here in the studio with me, they might be saying, "Now wait a minute, I'm a Muslim, and I'm not looking to conquer other Muslims or Christian. I live peaceably here in the West, or we live peaceably." I mean, certainly there are states and nations in the Middle East that are more peaceful than others, and in fact, Egypt, for many years was a great ally, and well, at least is a pretty good ally.
Muslims are actually the most loving and caring people that you can ever encounter. Mm-hmm. Muslims are the very first victim of Islam. They live their life, hoping to please Allah in every way they can. And it's not about conquer, it's not about fight for them. It's about raising their family, taking care of their kids, trying to do whatever they can, hoping that Allah will accept them in his heaven, in any way possible. Mm-hmm. And all of them believes that they were going to spend some time in hell at some point. Muslims are the nicest people ever you can even ever encounter. Muslims are victims more than actually anything else. So we should actually love and care for Muslims and reach out to them more than you can even imagine. Maybe they're not going to like what I'm saying, but between me and Muslims that, all the time we have those conversations, yes, sometimes they don't like what I'm saying, but you know what? I say the truth, and they know that this truth is truth, and we discuss it together. Do you think Muslims are you breaking the news to them that jihad is an ultimate goal in Islam? Do you think you are breaking the news to Muslims that Muhammad was a fighter and a martyr, and he was building an Islamic state? Do you think Muslims don't know that Muhammad moved to a small city in Medina and he changed the whole city and ruled over that city? Do you think Muslims has no idea that there was an Islamic conquest for 1,300 years? Do you think Muslims don't know that Egypt was a Christian nation and was conquered by the Islamic army and converted everybody to Islam? Do you think Muslims don't know all of that history about Islam?
I'm sure that they do. Yeah. So I'm that's a great distinction to make, because I could just imagine folks listening and saying, "Well, wait a minute, it's not all about warfare for us." But you're really saying within the text itself, within the religion itself, which we all know is sort of I shouldn't say we all know, but it is as much a socio-economic, political system as much as a religious outlook. I mean, there really is no distinction between those things, if I understand Islam correctly.
And there is millions and millions upon millions of Muslims out there who doesn't understand Islam as much you do, and they don't understand the text of Islam as much as they do, because Islam has to be only in Arabic, the Quran has to be only in Arabic, and all other things that they practice in Arabic, and there is a whole bunch of language barriers and other things. Yeah. So there is lots of Muslims don't really understand the very scope of Islam, but all the facts that I mentioned earlier about the history of Islam, they know very well, because this is part of their culture. You know about the American culture, so they know about the Islamic culture, the Islamic conquest, and other things. So Muslims are victims of Islam. Some of them are not knowledgeable. Some of them are knowledgeable. Many Muslims, as a matter of fact, are living their lives trying to be not so religious and not really practicing Islam to the teeth. But they are living with the burden of sin, and they're thinking that they're going to be punished for every day that they live and every breath that they take and every second that they live without practicing and living a devout Muslim family, devout Muslim life.
Yeah. I mean, it is a point worth repeating that ISIS, for example, has killed many, many Muslims. I'm sure more Muslims than Christians.
Yes,
which
because within Islam, sorry for interrupting you,
yep.
Within Islam, Muslims are appointed judges on others. So ISIS kill other Muslims not for reasoning of just killing them for the fun of it, because ISIS is doing exactly what the ancestors and the early Muslims did to others. When Muslims are not following Islam to the teeth, other Muslims has an obligation to kill them. You have a very good example. The president of Egypt, Sadat, at some point in 1981, was killed by other Muslims. Do you know why they killed him? Not because they just want to kill him. They said that he is not a Muslim because he signed a treaty with the Jews, and for that reason, he is not a Muslim anymore and supposed to be killed. This is how Muslims kill each other on a regular basis. When you see ISIS stopping, a truck on the road and asking, the people come out of the truck, and can you recite a couple of verses in the Quran and tell us how did you pray for the midday prayer or not? And when the person says, I don't know how to recite this, or I'm not good a Muslim enough, I did not pray today, then they shoot them in the head. Why they shoot them in the head? Because they appoint themselves judges on others to claim that they are not Muslims enough. So Muslims of ISIS are killing other Muslims because they think they are better Muslims. And this is based on the teachings of Muhammad himself. He says, whoever sees a sin, he has to identify it and take action against it.
You're listening to Dr. Mark Christian here on the Sin Bully radio program here at KPFT. If you're just joining us on the HD3 channel, you're hearing an impassioned Christian who has left Islam and who has family members very close to the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, and we're getting a first-hand account of it. Let's take a step back. I love your passion, and but let's talk about some of the theological reasons. And if this gets back into your biography, that's certainly fine. But talk about some of the theological things. I mean, we already have. I mean, everything we've talked about is theology. But I don't know if it's maybe what Islam teaches about Jesus that you saw came to be not true. But what were some of the sort of contradictory things that you saw in Islam that ultimately led you to believe it wasn't true?
Again, it goes back to the intentions of Muhammad himself and the story of Islam together, and discrepancies throughout the story altogether.
Okay.
And to go back, I have to mention many details, but when you think about Islam a little bit more, it is for me whether Islam is leading to God and talking about the real creator of heaven and earth or not. This is the point. It is or it is not. You cannot be both. So, for example, I look at one of the pillars of Islam. I'm going to give you an example. Pillars of Islam is the fifth one is to go to Mecca for pilgrimage. Okay? So I have done this myself 9 times in my Muslim life. Early on. I started going to Mecca when I was in 3rd grade. Okay? So, and it is a huge big deal for my dad because he's one of the leaders who write books about how to perform the pilgrimage, and he's leading people, and I did that the same as well with him and so forth. And when I look at the reason that the pilgrimage has been adopted into Islam is for political reasons. That, as a matter of fact, it was a place of idol worshipping. It was a place for nakedness and paganism. And Muhammad wants to take the city of Mecca, his birthplace. So he struck a deal with the people over there to say, I will adopt the ritual that is bringing all that kind of money into Islam, and in return, I will take that city without a fight. Is that? This is one. I'm just mentioning one incident. To be honest with you, it's not many incidents. And then you see when he went in and he started doing this, there is something that pilgrims do in Islam, that they go between 2 hills back and forth nonstop. So Muhammad walking into the city and start cleaning up. They say there was a clearing up so to make it an Islamic place. So he started destroying the idols, 360 of them around the Kaaba, which is the center place for Islam now. And he destroying all of those. And then he said, you know what, we're going to go between those two hills. And then other Muslims asking him, but Muhammad, these are two idols. You know, why is that? You know, why are we going to do this? And this is very weird for us because we used to this as before, you know, is that okay to do it? And then he invented a story that, you know, Hagar, you know, Abraham's wife was going between both those two places. So destroy and remove the idols and let them make it a place into Islam. When you read that stuff and you actually spend, you know, enormous amount of your time and effort as even a young man, and I see people are spending their hard-earned money and efforts and dying over there for doing this ritual. And we see how it was adopted into the religion and how it became part of it and how much it's a money maker till today for Saudi Arabia and how people believe that they get their kind of forgiveness over there and so forth. And you see the story of how it was adopted into the religion. Does that relate it to anything to God?
Well, not the God that I worship, for sure.
Have you ever seen, you know, when you hear the stories away from, you know, Islam and Christianity and Judaism and stuff like that, let's look at this man and just look at it as a normal human story. When you see a man doing this and bringing in, if it was Alexander the Great, for example, and he's walking into a city and making stories so people who follows him kind of, you know, make him, you know, praising him and stuff. If it is Caesar or anything like this, you're going to say this is a bunch of baloney. Don't you think?
Well, I would think so. But,
okay, I don't want you to offend anybody, but I am.
Well, I mean, I think these days causing offense is just. I think if anyone opens their mouth, they're going to offend somebody. So I've sort of gotten somewhat comfortable with that.
You know why I say that stuff? You know why I'm offending people? Because actually, when Muslims approach me, and sometimes they get offended because I say some stuff that is running in their mind, and they ask those questions, and they don't want to confront it. And I said to them, you know what? You hate me as much as you can, but you know what? I want you to be super, actually selfish, because the day will come when all of us will be confronted and stand in front of the Creator of heaven and earth. And we'll be accountable for what we did and what we believed in and what the truth that has been presented to us.
Right.
And at that time, you know what? Muhammad and nobody else is going to be there for us. It's not our community. It's not our family. It is not Islamophobe or not. It is about the truth. God will ask us, the truth has been presented to us. Why did you reject?
Yeah. Because
your family? Because your community? Because you're afraid to confront the truth? This is why I'm asking. Hate me as much as you can. But you know what? The day will come and you will stand naked in front of the Creator of heaven and earth.
Yeah. And we all will, right? And
Amen.
the only thing that gives me that the only reason I'm not completely terrified of that day is because of the grace and mercy of Jesus Christ, who is my intercessor. Let me ask two questions about Christianity, and as it relates to Islam, because in apologetics, I've heard two things specifically about Islam as sort of the best rejoinders to Islam. That you know, without getting into any kind of emotional appeals or anything like that, but just sort of factual point. So the first is the crucifixion of Jesus, and I'm sure you know this well, but I'd be curious from an insider point of view. Is it really the understanding in Islam that Jesus was not crucified, but I believe instead ascended into heaven, and someone who looked like Jesus was crucified in his place? Because Christian apologists would love to point out that one of the best-known facts of all of ancient history, really all of human history, is that Jesus of Nazareth was crucified in between two other criminals. And to refute this, you have to wonder if Muhammad knew the scriptures very well, knew history very well, or cared. So what did you hear about the crucifixion of Jesus, and is that what's explicitly taught in the Quran, that he was not in fact crucified?
It's not. I heard. I actually studied.
Okay.
And memorized the Quran. To answer your question, I would love to have an hour by yourself. But
well, we can do another show.
This privilege, so let's get it very quick. Well, there is lots of contradiction within the Quran and the teachings of Islam itself. And Jesus has been mentioned in the Quran more than anything and anybody else as Christianity and Jesus himself. Okay?
Okay.
And the name of Jesus as well. So the more you mention something or somebody or Christianity, there's lots of contradictions. So you're absolutely accurate when you say that there is verses in the Quran that says that Jesus was never crucified, was never killed, and he actually, by the time with the crucifixion was about to take place, that Allah intervened in a miraculous way. And when the Roman soldiers walked into the cell where Jesus was locked, Jesus was replaced by another person, and they took that person and put him on the cross. And instead, Jesus, the real Jesus, was elevated up to heaven, and he is sitting on the right side of Allah right now, waiting for his comeback. And his comeback is going to be a very dramatic comeback, where he's going to come and destroy the cross, tell all the Christians that they have been worshiping the wrong God, that he never told them to worship him, that he never said that there is a Trinity, and he's going to destroy the cross and destroy the churches and completely destroy the narrative of Christianity. And then he will take some time to kill all the, the swine, so there's no more pigs on earth. And then he will pick up the sword and he will fight for the cause of Islam until he dies, because every human being has to die, including Jesus. So he's only going to die in his second coming. This is one story that the majority, I'm not saying all Muslims actually believe in. Okay?
Okay.
Yet, chapter 3 in the Quran, in the verse number 55, tells you something very interesting in one verse. Okay? It is God or Allah is addressing Jesus. And the reason that this verse made it in the Quran, actually because Muhammad was in a discussion with Christians, Catholics at that time. So he said that, and you see the discrepancies and some kind of arguments that changes back and forth depending on the situation. And Muhammad was very good at that. Okay. But in that verse, he was addressing the Christians, and he's telling that Jesus, actually God or Allah is talking to Jesus, says, I will kill you, I will let you die, and I will cleanse you, and I will elevate you up to me, and you will be seated on my right side, and I will make those who believe in you superior and supreme to all humans until the day of judgment. Isn't that by itself very clear that it talks about Jesus dying? So in that verse it says Jesus died. Okay? So I ask Muslims, I know that your story that you know about and stuff like that. What about this verse in the Quran, chapter 355? You can Google it, you can look it up right now. So all Islamists, because they are confronting with those questions at this time, they try to say, you know what, in this Arabic word, dying does not really mean dying. It means like deep sleep. And I said, so what is the deep sleep in this? It says in Arabic, as it really says, he's going to die. So how did Jesus die? Did he die in a car accident? Was it like, have an Ebola? How did he die? And then they have no answer for that. You know what I'm saying? So there is lots of discrepancies within the Quran itself, but definitely it's not only the verse that I'm talking about. There is another verse as well that talks about that. But the story of Jesus has been mentioned in the Quran numerous times and in the teachings of Muhammad many times, and there is lots of discrepancies and contradiction with it. But Muslims tend to believe the only narrative that I mentioned earlier where he was replaced. And they actually claim that the one who has been replaced and put on the cross was Judas himself, because it was Allah's judgment on Judas because he betrayed Jesus and so forth.
Yeah, I did look up that verse, and one translation says, when Allah said, O Jesus, indeed I will take you and raise you to myself and purify you from those who disbelieve and make those who follow you in submission to Allah alone superior to those who disbelieve until the day of resurrection. So
yes, and see, you will see between brackets, believe in Allah alone, right?
Right.
Okay, why? Yeah. Because it's not in the scripture. It's not in the Quran. There is nothing in the Quran says. This is an addition for the Western to read that. And then also, it neglected the idea that he says, the verse in the Quran, which is supposed to be in Arabic, because actually Islam is only in Arabic, by the way. It has to be in Arabic. So they have to read the Quran in Arabic because this is the language that Allah understands and the angels according to Islam. I think somebody needs to send Allah a Rosetta Stone or something. But on the side note, it says over the Inni mutawaffika in Arabic. Sorry for saying that in Arabic, but it says specifically, I will make you die, and I will cleanse you, and I will lift you up, and I will make those who believes in you, superior to others until the day of judgment.
Yeah. I'd like to ask about another verse, and I didn't send this to you ahead of time. So if it's something you want to study more or aren't familiar with, that's certainly fine because I'm kind of putting you on the spot. But let me tell you why I'm asking about this. It's Surah 6:144. And I don't know, I've never read the Quran, okay, so I'm not pretending here to know much about Islam at all, but this is a surah I've heard a friend of mine who's come on the show, and a Christian apologist, Saitin Bruggencate, he uses this particular verse as his sort of apologetic when Muslims come to him. He's a presuppositional apologist, and his argument is very simple. He says, can
you read the verse for me, because I cannot recall which verse?
Yes, sir. Here's and I've got about 10 different translations, but so I'll pick one. It says, Muhammad say, and then in quotations, "Should I seek any judge other than God? It is He who has revealed this book, the Quran, to you with all its intricate details." End quote. Those to whom we have given the Bible know that the Quran has been revealed to you from your Lord in all truth. Thus, you, people, must have no doubts about it. Let's see. Let me read another portion of that verse from a different translation. Those unto whom we gave the Scripture, which some understand to be the Torah and the Injil, the Gospel, know that it is revealed from your Lord in truth. So be not you of those who doubt. Now, here's the basic apologetic that, for example, Saitin Bruggencate uses. He says, if the Quran is true, then the Scriptures, the Christian Scriptures, are true. If the Christian Scriptures are true, then Islam is false. Now, what he means...
This is the only person that said that, actually. This is my statement.
Okay. Oh, wait,
who said that statement?
A Christian apologist named Saitin Bruggencate.
Yeah, I'm the first one who said that statement, actually.
Oh, well, maybe he got it from you. I don't know. So
yeah.
I've heard him say it in debates or in Q&A sessions, so I don't... Yes. I'm not trying to start a apologist civil war here or anything like that.
No, actually, because it's absolutely true. I agree with it. I'm not saying it is wrong.
Yeah.
So your question about this is what? Can you
keep the question? Sure. Okay, so his argument is that the Quran says that the Christian Scriptures are true, and he references this verse, 6:144, Surah 6, verse 144, as his proof that the Quran says that the Christian Scriptures are to be believed. And his point is that, the Christian Scriptures, if they're true, they say things that are in flat contradiction to Islam, like Jesus was crucified and rose from the dead, for example. So his point is, if you're a Muslim, you kind of have to pick your poison. Either the Quran can be false and therefore be wrong about the Christian Scriptures being trustworthy, or the Quran can be true and the Christian Scriptures can be trustworthy. But if that's right, then if the Christian Scriptures are right, then they have to win out, and Christianity must be true, and Islam must be false. So
okay. Here is why this argument. When I say, I had an argument in a paper about if the Quran is true, then the Bible has to be true, and if the Bible is true, then the Quran is false and Islam is wrong. But what you are presenting is, if by that argument, from your perspective, because I have a different take on it.
Okay.
I'm going to address your take on it. Your take on it is the Bible is very clear about Jesus claiming to be the Son of God, mm-hmm. and that he died on the cross and so forth, and so he is who he is, and there's no place for Muhammad and so forth, right?
Right.
Okay. When the verses that you are referring to in the Quran is not referring to that kind of Bible that you are talking about. Why? Because in other verses in the Quran, as Muhammad has mentioned multiple times, that the Jews and the Christians, and I said that earlier, has got it wrong. What does that mean? He in Muhammad's claim, Jesus was absolutely right, that he came in presenting the fact about Allah the same like he is. But after his elevation up to heaven without being crucified, the people who believed in him later on changed the whole narrative. And he actually claims that the person that did this, the most evil person in Christianity, or the inventor of the Christianity, is Paul at the road of Damascus.
Mm-hmm.
That he came in and he invented the whole Christianity and the Trinity and all that comes together, and it has nothing to do with the real message of Jesus Christ. So the Bible that you have in your hand is not the Bible that the Quran is referencing to, is not the Bible that the Quran is talking about as a legitimate book. As a matter of fact, it talks about the Bible that does not exist anymore. That the Bible in your hand right now is a corrupted and plagiarized kind of book that has been changed and twisted multiple times, especially everything that has been referred to Paul or the Trinity and so forth. And it has nothing to do with the truth whatsoever.
Yeah.
So this is why Muslims, when you present to the Bible to them and say, here is what it says, and they tell you, oh, okay, that's good, but this is wrong. Why? Because what you have in your hand is not the Bible that is the Quran is referencing to. That was a book in the Muslim belief, that there was a book that has been revealed by Jesus himself, to Jesus himself, and Jesus himself put together before he was resurrected or he was elevated up to heaven. And that book has been destroyed by Paul and the other Christians, and they presented a Trinity and Christianity that has nothing to do with Jesus himself. And there's multiple verses in the Quran reference to this.
Interesting. Okay, so, well, what about historical arguments? And none of these, by the way, are the questions that I sent to you, so we're going to have to do another show. But what about the historical questions then? I mean, for example, not to go into a long thing, but I think that without a doubt we could prove historically that we have the words with almost 100% certainty that the apostles wrote in the New Testament, for example. So any claims of corruption are just that. They're just a claim. It's just an accusation. It can't be proved because of all the streams and the sources and the different script traditions of the manuscript traditions and so forth. You take all that evidence, the earliest manuscripts that we have, and we can be confident that we have the New Testament. Is that an argument that would hold any sway with a Muslim? Because
absolutely, but even more than that. Here is a thing for me I go back to my testimony myself, okay?
Yep.
When I was introduced, number one, I want to, share something with you. Those arguments and my understanding and my depth and how God prepared me to where I am right now is a miracle, and God did a miracle in my life. So I'm amazed by how God is using me. Number one. Number two is I did write about these arguments in details, and we have our website is full with information, and I speak a lot in different places. You can find lots of stuff on YouTube and other things about addressing some of those arguments, and I will continue doing more. Okay. Because the questions that you're asking are very good, and they take so much to understand and to answer.
Yeah.
So going back to your question about Jesus, okay? I will share with you my own journey, okay? When I first learned about Jesus, okay, I did not take everything I hear all of a sudden like it's true, okay? I as I mentioned earlier, I'm a very, I question everything, okay? Mm-hmm. So I started digging into Islam. My first response when I was confronted by Christianity in a different perspective and Jesus and the reality of history and so forth, I started going back to the Quran. And when I started digging into the Quran, I started reading different chapters and digging into more of understanding and historical events of it. There is a verse in the Quran that is called Yasin, for example, that Muslims regard as a very high regard. It's one of the most important chapters in the Quran. Why? Because Yasin is one of the names of Muhammad, and it is supposed to be read when you are needing some help and so forth. And when we start reading into this, it talks about two anonymous people walked into a city, and then followed by, it's talk about a story, two anonymous guys that talks about God, and they are trying to worship to a city, to minister to a city that knows nothing about God. Mm. And they were confronted by lots of opposition. So God sent another person to help them in their endeavors, and then end up that the city has been a believer. I read these chapters, you cannot even imagine how many times I memorized it. And then when I read it for the first time, I wanted to know, okay, those anonymous people, who are they? Mm. So I went to the books of Tafsir, which is what Muhammad talked about, the verses and so forth, to understand, what does that verse really mean. And I was confronted by something that gave me chills. It talks about actually, Peter and Barnabas, and followed by another person, going into Antioch, building the church over there. But no Muslim ever thought about who are those people and what they are doing. So the question comes to me is, was Peter actually talking about Jesus as somebody who was crucified and resurrected, or he was just, talking about, Allah and Muhammad coming and so forth, as Islam claims, and it was just twisted by Paul later on. And then I figured out there was a church over there. Historically, Peter walked into Antioch, and he...
Oh, are you there? I can't hear you. I can't hear you. I don't know if you can hear me. I might have lost the cell phone connection. Oh, I think there you go. Hang on. I'm going to drop this call. And hopefully he'll give me a call right back, because I want to hear the end of the story. We're almost... Here we go. All right, are you back?
I lost you.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry about that. I don't know what happened. Maybe we're being censored. I don't know.
That's good.
Yeah.
So I don't know where I lost you in the story.
No, it was right when you were cut off. I don't know how to. You're talking about Peter in Antioch.
Antioch, yes.
Yeah.
So the question is, was really Peter walking in Antioch talking about Islam and the forthcoming of Muhammad, or he was talking about Jesus and the crucifixion and the resurrection and Jesus dying for our sin? And you see that there were historically, it was a church. It was a Christian.
Right.
That Peter is the founder of the church, of the Catholic Church and so forth. So if you dig deep into some of the sayings of Muhammad, you will see the truth jumping on your face.
Yeah.
And in multiple ways. But you have to be willing to know the truth. So when I started learning about Jesus in that respect and how Muhammad hijacked, the message of Jesus and tried to twist it to fit his narrative, I had to go back and find out more historically. And then after historically, I need to start looking into the scripture itself. My journey from starting knowing about Jesus to give my life to him, it took from 2001 all the way to 2005.
So
I'm very skeptical.
Yeah, that's a lot of study. Yeah, I mean, it just seems obvious to me that if anyone is going to speak about Jesus, that the earlier the closer to Jesus, the better. And Muhammad is writing the Quran, or it's written some 600 years or so after the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. Whereas I think that we can get portions of Corinthians, for example, to within a year or two, like the Creed in 1 Corinthians 15. People say we can get that to within a year of the resurrection. And of course, Galatians was probably written in the late 40s. And the Gospels, I think the Gospels were written in the late 50s, early 60s. And then even John, I think, was written relatively early as well, not in the middle of the 2nd century or something. So those seem like pretty good sources to me, and the flow of history seems like a pretty good source to me as well, rather than something 600 years later. Unfortunately,
what I actually was referring to mostly is, when you look, I agree 100% with you. And by the way, at the time of Muhammad, the church was already well established. The Bible was in its current form. It was not changed. It was
right.
nothing.
Yeah.
When you look at Muhammad's life and how he was, introduced to Christianity, he was introduced by one of the sects that was very viable at that time, and he didn't know much about it. And this is why we are kind of facing this kind of situation with Muhammad. So there is so much that you need to learn about Muhammad to know why he got his stories mixed up like this, plus his intentions to twist things to fit his own narrative.
Right.
But at the time of Muhammad, the church was already established. The Christian Roman Empire was already established, Constantine and Constantinople and other places. The Bible was in its current form. Everything was already well established. It was a very deliberate, action on Muhammad and fellow Muslims to change and twist things. And historically, you will see that there was a church that was already there. When he is highlighting the story of Peter walking into Antioch. This means that either he was wrong or history was wrong. And historically, you will see in Antioch, there is a vibe church that was built on the message of Jesus, the real message of Jesus, which is the crucifixion, the resurrection, and dying for our sin.
Yeah. Dr. Christian, unfortunately, I am up against it. I'm already a little bit over my time. But I want to make sure people know where to find you. You're Dr. Mark Christian. You're at the Global Faith Institute, and that is easily found at globalfaithinstitute.org. Stay on the line, if you will. I want to thank you so much for coming on. Your story is fascinating, and we just got to the tip of the iceberg. So,
can I share one thing before I go? I want people to understand that Muslims are the very first victims of Islam. Muslims are people who need to be reached out. They are under the torment sin of Islam, and they need to be reached out, to be loved on, to be cared about, to build friendship with. And this is what I do on a regular basis. I love Muslims more than you can even imagine. I'm not encouraging anybody to have any hatred against any Muslim, because Jesus told us to love everyone around us, and nobody needs more love than Muslims who are under the heavy weight of sin.
That is so important, and I want to make sure people understand we're not looking to hate here. I mean, we're lovers, and we're lovers of all people, and
I know the truth too. Truth.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again so much for your time. I've got to wrap it up. Stay on the line, though. Stay on the line. I'll be right back. Dr. Christian, again, globalfaithinstitute.org, and to all my listeners here at KPFT. On the on HD3 channel. I want to thank you for listening, and we will see you next week. Until then, may you have the peace that passes all understanding. See ya.